How's it going, everyone? It's Javi here, back with another winter outlook forecast. Well, it's not another. This is the first time I'm really doing this, and I'm gonna try it out from 2017 to 2017 winter outlook forecast. So I'm gonna forecast the winter for the next 3 months and see if I'm correct after the winter is over. But it should also give you a good idea of what to expect this winter. But keep in mind that not everything is correct. What you know that weather changes quickly and stuff could happen. So take this with a grain of salt, but these predictions can be verified over history it it can be seen happen over the past several winters. So it isn't 100% wrong either. So take this with a grain of salt. It could change, but it should give you at least an idea of what's going to happen if all the conditions are still set like they are right now, and if that were to continue throughout the winter. So let's begin. So first thing we need to track when predicting the winter season for the United States is the water temperatures, and specifically the Pacific water temperatures right around the equator, because those water temperatures right around the equator of the Pacific really give an idea of what kind of winter we're going to get, because those water temperatures right around the Pacific, around the equator, is where El Nino and La Nina occur, which are two vital patterns that have a huge effect on the United States in terms of what's going to happen in the winter. So looking at the sea surface temperatures anomaly, and what that basically means is that how much above or below average the water temperatures are, it is right here. You could see that I want you to pay attention to the coordinates between 120 west and 180 west, and that area right in the middle of the map. I want you to focus on that. As you can see, there isn't much of a difference, or it isn't really way above average, or it isn't really way below average. Obviously, the blue means below average. The darker the blue, the more below average it is. The darker the red, the more above average the water temperatures are. And you could see between those two coordinates that there isn't really consistency with this a La Nina or this an El Nino, which shows that this could be actually a really neutral season for the El Nino and La Nina cycle. And to define El Nino and La Nina is basically when temperatures are below 0.5 degrees, the sea surface temperature, and for El Nino, it's basically the opposite. So it looks like to be neutral, maybe leaning towards La Nina a little bit, which could definitely, and if this continues through the winter, and you could see the index, you could see as of very recently, we just have barely, not even it can't even be considered a La Nina. It's the water temperatures are slightly below average, which means that it's not going to be below average enough to be considered a La Nina, but it's mostly showing a neutral season. But if that trend continues, we could see a La Nina. And to give you the typical weather patterns for the neutral El Nino seasons, we usually see very warm conditions in the southern part of the United States and very wet conditions also in the southern part. And we have usually a subtropical jet that basically interacts with the polar jet that brings cold air down towards the Midwest and Northeast slightly. And as you know, when the subtropical jet and Atlantic jet stream meet up right by the Northeast, that could bring huge nor'easters in the Northeast, and that brings us the heavy snows and those big historic snowstorms in the Northeast. So that could mean that there could be a very cold and snowy winter in the Northeast, quite wet with a lot of thunderstorms and maybe some ice right around the mid-Atlantic to northern southeast. And as for the Pacific, we have a Pacific jet stream that goes towards Washington, which could bring more above average wet conditions. But so that's for the neutral side. How about La Nina? If this trend continues to go lower, if the water temperatures continue to go lower, it should be a La Nina season. And it looks basically the same. We have above average temperatures in the south, and then we have still wet conditions interacting with this polar jet stream, and if those interact in the northeast, those will bring the big snowstorms. We have wet conditions in the Pacific and very cold weather towards the Midwest to northwest part of the United States, and very dry in the Pacific. So they're very similar, but they do have some slight differences. We have a more warmer, we have a more drier southwest. We have a more colder northwest than usual, but overall they almost look identical. But that's not the only thing we need that is needed to determine how this winter season will play out. Another huge thing is the North American oscillation. So what this means is that basically when there's a positive North Atlantic oscillation, that basically means that there's the high pressure and the low pressure are very strong for that part of the season, and then that increases the winds towards the west, which basically makes the cold air from Canada move more west instead of like building up and dropping down south to north to the United States. While a negative NAO basically means that the low pressure and the high pressure in the Atlantic are very weak and the west winds aren't strong, which basically allows the cold air from Canada to build up and sink down to the United States. So here's a forecast. Well, here's a forecast for the NAO. This, as of right now, it is basically at a neutral stage NAO, which basically means that it could really like be in the middle. It might get cold a little bit, but it won't get that cold. But as for the forecast, you could see it rises very rapidly going into the middle of October, but then the forecasts are predicting it to drop back down. And if that drop down continues, that means that we could see a negative NAO for the winter, which could definitely bring colder conditions to the United States and possibly very big snowstorms in the east coast of the United States, and bring very extremely cold weather conditions in the United States. So that could be huge. And here's a map representation of a positive NAO and you could see strong high pressure, strong low pressure. The winds towards the west basically push the cold air towards the west and not drop down to the United States. And then you could see when this happens, we have below average snow in the Northeast, and then warmer than average temperatures for most of the East Coast. And then it's a complete opposite with a negative. We have above average snow in the Northeast, and then colder than normal for basically most of the United States. So the predictions are saying that it's going to drop down to a negative NAO, and if that happens, and assuming that trend continues, it's going to be a very cold winter. But like I said, the winter could change. The weather changes quickly. But here's my map representation of the winter season, and I'm gonna do this real quick. I'm predicting very cold and snowy conditions in the Northeast. I expect huge nor'easters and huge snowstorms this winter for the Northeast. And then we have winter battle zone mostly towards mid-Atlantic and Midwest, and that basically means that I expect a lot of ice, like maybe snow, maybe rain. Sometimes it's going to be inconsistent. And then we have rain. I think it's going to be quite rainy with thunderstorms in the Southeast, slightly above average temperatures, extremely cold in the Midwest, very wet in the Northwest, very dry in the Southwest, and then mostly average right around Texas area. So yeah, get ready for a big winter season in the Northeast, mid-Atlantic possibly, and wet in the Southeast. So